Prime Minister, the Honorable Mia Amor Motley, has gone on record as saying one of the greatest interventions a government can make is enabling citizens to own a piece of the rock. On this one-on-one, we look at the demand for housing and what's being done to supply it. Our special guest is the Minister of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, Dr. the Honorable William Duguid. Minister, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So let's jump right into it. Now, the National Housing Corporation, it was established to find housing solutions at affordable prices for Barbadians. Is it still serving its purpose?
Yes, we are endeavoring to continue to find as many affordable housing solutions as we can for people. You would be aware that we've just launched our location to build 20 units in terms of quads, and they'll be at the corner of White Park Road and Country Road. And that is about to actually start construction on Monday, and we're very happy with that one. In addition, we've also been working at Todd's, where we're doing a ribbon development there, and 15 houses, of which some are complete, if are almost complete, some are in various stages of completion. And that project is working very, very well. And those houses have been allotted. I think they're in the 140, 150 range, house and land. And we're very happy with that program. And you would agree with me that that is definitely an affordable price. After that, we're about to start very shortly, once we get the board approval, for 10 houses at Rice's and 4 houses at Applewitz. And that will be another 14 houses that will also be in that general price range. So between the housing solutions in terms of quads for rental and also houses for sale, we're making quite reasonable progress in getting those done. We also have some land for sale at Deanstown. We would have had a land fair there. Some people would have put down their names, but then they would have dropped out from time to time for various reasons, not able to meet the mortgage requirements, things like that. And I think we still have about 12 lots there at Deanstown Heights, a wonderful location. The advertisement is on Instagram, and I encourage people who would be interested in those lots. I think they're $18 a square foot. When I went to National Housing, they were in the $24, $25 range. We made a decision to reduce that price to get them moving. We now have about 12 left. And if you're interested, you can go and look at the National Housing Corporation IG website and get that information to be able to purchase some land lots there at Deanstown. So we have lots of programs in terms of housing, be it land, be it rental units, be it houses for sale. And we're continuing to look for new and innovative ways to be able to house people in Barbados.
And just for the sake of clarity, going back to the Todd's project, you mentioned that it was a ribbon program?
Right, so a ribbon development is a development where the road is already there. So it's a bit of land owned by government or National Housing Corporation where you don't have to put in the road. Because one of the biggest costs when we come to develop land is to design the road, engineer the road, put in the road, and then put in the services, the drains, the water infrastructure, the electricity infrastructure. All of those things add cost. So if you can find land where you don't have to put in those because the road is existing there, and Todd's was one of those. So there was land bordering an existing road. So we go through and we look for those, and we look to see where we have places that the road is existing, that we have land, because then we just have to go and put in the houses. And that's why we're able to get going on some of those quickly by looking for ribbon developments.
No, sticking with NHC, there's still a very long waiting list. Some people have been on that waiting list for more than 25 years.
Yeah.
What are you doing to help clear the backlog?
So the first thing that we did when I went to the ministry is we hired some people to come on contract to look at that database, to see of those people that were on for 25 years, how many have found a housing solution, do not no longer require a housing solution. That was the first thing. But there is no government that can meet the need of the people wanting housing. It's too much. There are thousands of people on the various housing lists, and we just don't have the wherewithal to build all of those houses. But we prioritize and we do the best we can. Right now, we have been prioritizing fire victims. So people who, from no fault of their own, or who were sometimes even victims of arson. who have lost everything in a fire. So when units become available, a lot of those have been going to fire victims, people who have suffered, I don't want to put up people's information, but other social problems that are dire and difficult, and we tend to prioritize those people for units. People must also understand, because a lot of people want to get rental units. But in the previous administration, they gave away thousands of rental units. So the National Housing Corporation does not have access to the numbers of rental units that it used to have. So therefore, we don't get that often access to rental units. And sometimes I get many calls that people say this unit is vacant, that unit is vacant. And I often have to say vacant does not mean available. Because a unit might be vacant, but it may be under the 20-year program and it's no longer under the control of the National Housing Corporation. It would be under the control of the person who was in it and tenant for 20 years and was given then that unit by the previous administration.
Has that program ended?
That program has not been extended, in that those who were 17, 18 years then, the people who now have been who've been tenants now for 20 years would think that they would now qualify, but that has not extended in that way. And no decision has been made on that as yet.
What about the rent-to-own program? Does that exist?
So there's a small rent-to-own program which was at the Grotto, and that still continues.
But you still do rent-to-own for some housing developments as well?
No, we don't have any. The main one was at the Grotto.
That was the main one. Okay, so you were touching on rent. How is the NHC now coping in terms of defaulters? I know times are tough. Are you still having that issue?
Yes, it's difficult for people to make their rent payments, but they are trying and endeavoring, and we're working with our tenants as much as possible to assist them where necessary. Those who have fallen on hard times because of loss of jobs and so on, we direct them to the welfare department, because as you may be aware, the welfare department does also pay the rent for people who have great difficulty, who have fallen onto hard times. So between working with the welfare department and working with the tenants to be able to clear any arrears, helping them to be able to meet their commitments, that has been working reasonably well.
Are you in a position to state in terms of the dollar figure?
No, I wouldn't have that.
Okay. The older housing units, a concern with many of them would have been the electrical wiring. You had a program, or you have a program, where you're going in and upgrading the electrical work. How is that going?
Yeah, we're very proud of our electrical upgrade program. And let me, in particular, talk about Mr. Ward, who has been heading that program with National Housing Corporation. And I'm very, very happy with how that work is progressing. Right now, we have in total about 400 people working in improving all the wiring for the National Housing Corporation's estates. We've completed Haynesville. We're working on Ferniehurst and Deacons and a number of the other estates. And in fact, we've just put out a tender to be able to take on more electricians, to be able to expand that program, to get as many of those electrical upgrades done as quickly as possible. Let me say this electrical upgrade program is very, very dear to my heart. I'll explain to you why. When I was a new Member of Parliament, I think my second month as a Member of Parliament, I got called to a house fire, which we think was an electrical problem in Pleasant Hall, West St. Matthias, in the Pleasant Hall housing estate. And 3 young people actually died in that fire at that time. And then the 4th person who went to the intensive care died a few days later. Her name was Pinky. And that is really dear to my heart, because to think that just an upgrade of electrical wiring could have saved people's lives is so important, and it's such an important piece of work that we have to do to protect our people. Because at the end of the day, you can lose a house, but you can build back a house. You can lose money, but you can make back money. Nobody can give back a life. And who's to say what those people could have become if they had an opportunity to have gotten to adulthood and beyond.
Let's look at your WELLS program.
Another problem where a young man unfortunately lost his life in the Pine. And it's sad sometimes to think that it takes those kinds of issues to then highlight and then cause us to go and fix a problem. And we have finished the majority of the work in the Pine. We have lots more work to do. Again, we have brought on people to assist us with that. And we're not only doing maintaining the wells and also desludging the wells and making the covers better, but in areas where the covers were not appropriate and yet still we had to desludge, we've done some concrete slabs just to cover them over temporarily till we can come back and do all the remedial work. That program, and that's being headed by another very excellent officer in National Housing Corporation, Mr. Dwight Thornhill. And I'm happy with the progress. Of course, I'm not happy with the speed at which it's being done. I always want it done yesterday, but it is progressing well, and I keep a constant eye on it, and we're progressing. But there are hundreds of wells. 900, I think, wells, I think was the last count we've done, about 30% of them, and we'll continue to prioritize them. Those we have not been able to get to for the total program, we've temporarily covered them, and it's progressing.
Now, one of your ministry's newest projects is the Home Ownership Providing Energy, or HOPE project. Tell us about this new project.
Yes, so the HOPE project is an innovative one. It has excited the Barbadian population, and I think rightly so. So what the HOPE project is essentially we are using government-owned land, National Housing Corporation land, and I can give you an example, which is the one at Lancaster, which is where we launched the HOPE project. And the project is essentially designed that we will build a house as reasonable as we can. And the person that buys the house is going to pay only for the house. So it means that their mortgage would not include the cost of the land, the cost of the infrastructure, as I said, the roads, the water, the electrical, all of that. That would be paid for by a photovoltaic system on the roof of that house. So that photovoltaic system will produce energy which is sold to the grid, and then the Barbados Light and Power pays back, in this case, pays HOPE for that energy that goes into the grid. And that money would then be used to repay National Housing Corporation for its land, and also to pay for the cost of the road and the electrical and the water and so on. And that program is such a good program that the cost then to the person from a mortgage point of view will be much, much less, because the land essentially will be like what the down payment would have been. And then on top of it, we're negotiating best prices for the people who are providing the wood, who are providing the roofing material, who are providing all of the electrical, who are providing all of the tiles, best prices that we can, because we're buying in bulk. So those best prices give a further discount to the person who will then be the final purchaser of the house. And it's at minimal cost to government, because those houses will be going then through the mortgage finance companies, be it the credit union, the bank of their choice, of the purchaser's choice, to then be able to purchase. So you could get a 2-bedroom or 3-bedroom house for just paying $900 or $1,000 a month, whatever it may be, depending on the house.
And you have different levels. You're targeting different income groups.
Right. So that is what we call HOPE Direct, which is at Lancaster. You would have seen then we just had a town hall meeting at St. Christopher when we discussed HOPE Premium. So HOPE Direct is $0 to $4,000. HOPE Premium is for those people who fall into the category of $4,000 to $8,000, because you'd recognize that there are some people who are above $4,000 but who still need a housing solution. And that we're doing through a joint venture with a private entity. In this instance, it will be Preconco. And what they will do is, rather than the government have to put in the roads and the infrastructure, we just provide the land. They will pay us back for the land on sale, and they will do the design for the roads, put in the water, the infrastructure, the electricals, the plumbing, the drainage, the slippers, the curbs, all of those things. And then they will, together with the mortgage companies and the owners, then build the houses. The mortgages will then pay for the houses, and then government will get paid back for its land. So this is a developer-driven project for those between $4,000 and $8,000. I can also give you a teaser. We also have another one that we're working on called HOPE Basic. And that's for people in the $0 to $2,000 range. And I haven't launched it. We're still going through the process. But that is another program, all in the HOPE umbrella, that I'm working on as well.
And I'm glad that you mentioned that particular income group, because the concern has been over the years that we talk about low-income housing. But who's in that group?
Well, how do you quantify low?
Well, you just said
that is
0
the
to
issue.
2000.
So I'm looking at that one, and that is another program that we're working to bring to the market very, very shortly.
Okay. So,
But don't think that it's being left out, because it is not.
okay. Now, while you do offer rentals and a lot of house and land packages, again, there's a concern that many people are not getting the option to just purchase land, because people do want to build their own homes. Is that something your ministry is looking at?
Yes, so land only is an option. I said Deanstown, we already have. We had some for sale there, so there was an opportunity to purchase land. And we are still looking at places where we will be doing land only. So we've not taken, nothing is off the table. All things are possible and all things are on the table. But I must say, my emphasis right now in this COVID environment is to be able to put people to work, to get jobs. And yes, when you do a land package, you will get some jobs in that the persons have to go into doing the construction of the road. But the most jobs are the construction of the house. And what we find is many people buy land, but then they never build the house. And many times you can go into the development that was land only. There'll be a house here, and then 2 lots are vacant, maybe overgrown. Then another house partly finished, not completed, only at ring beam level. Takes 2 years to get from ring beam level to put on the roof. And the development is not the best, and it doesn't provide the number of jobs. So yes, we are looking at land only developments. We already have, as I said, at Deanstown Heights, and then we're looking at a few others that as we go forward. But my issue is, my main focus is jobs right now. My thing is to get people back to work. The construction industry has languished for a long, long time in Barbados. And if we can spark this economy, if construction can be the driving force to get this economy going again, to get people back to work, to get not only the carpenters and the masons and the tilers and the electricians, but also the delivery people, also the people that are working at the hardware stores, also those people that are assisting the landscapers, and all those things, that we can get this economy going, driven by housing, driven by road development. These are the things that we're focusing on. But yes, land available for land only, we're also looking at those.
So you just mentioned jobs. However, as housing minister, what is your greatest concern?
Wow, that's a difficult one. There's so many concerns. Right now, my greatest concern is emergency housing. Emergency housing. And it's another program I'm looking at. How can I get emergency housing for people? So often, house fires again, somebody has been evicted, can't get some place, living in somebody's cellar, living in somebody's backyard, because there's no access to emergency housing. And a house has fallen down, house has collapsed. In my own constituency, we had a house that collapsed, and we had a gentleman living in a backyard for a year because his house had collapsed. And so I think emergency housing is one of my greatest concerns. And also, let me go back, National Housing Corporation, something that I'm very proud of. Apart from the painting of the National Housing Corporation building, which I think it was an excellent opportunity for us to show that not only are we a housing ministry, but we're also into maintenance. Remember, it's not Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance. And we could not be in maintenance and not maintain our own building. And that building had not been painted for 20 years. And I'm very happy that we were able to get that building finally repaired and painted. But to get back to the issue of the National Housing Corporation in particular, and those areas of people getting access for emergency housing. And too often we have people who are in dire need of emergency housing, and we just don't have the units. We just can't house them appropriately. And I think that is my greatest need. I'm also very happy with our refunds program, where people have had a chance who would have paid deposits to the National Housing Corporation from 2007 and up to 2021, were not able to get back their deposits. And we've started that program. 140 people have gotten back their deposits, be it in bonds, a few in cash, and there are 540, I believe, altogether. And I'm encouraging people who would have gotten a letter from the National Housing Corporation to come in and make arrangements, give your details, so that we can get your deposits back to you as quickly as possible.
Now, you mentioned emergency housing, and you mentioned a lot of the time it's as a consequence of house fires. Do you think there is a need for us to look at possibly having insurance, making it mandatory?
Well, I do understand that, but where in the world is there mandatory housing insurance? I can't think of anywhere. So mandatory housing insurance is an interesting concept, but it's not something that this government has committed to at this time.
Okay, so you are the Minister of Maintenance as well, as you would have
Yes.
alluded to just now. In terms of the maintenance on government buildings, you have been saying, it's costing government a lot to pay private landlords. I think it was $65 million a year.
Yes.
And you're looking at renovating a lot of these old government buildings.
Yes.
How is that program going?
Okay, so that program is another very good program. So far, we've just completed, I wouldn't really call it renovations, but retrofitting of the old Sanitation Service Authority building. And that building will house the new digitization program under the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology. And we're trying to put as many of those buildings back into use as possible. The next one that we've started and progressing well is the gatehouse at the former Barbados Water Authority building. And we will be renovating all three of those buildings. So the gatehouse first, and that will house the QS, Quantity Surveyors Department for the Ministry of Transport Works and Maintenance. Then the middle building, which will be the warehouse building, that will then house the drainage unit. And then the three-story building, which will be what would be the administrative building, which is essentially a building that my wife used to work in. And it's interesting that the building that I used to go to pick her up from is now the building that I am the minister to renovate. And that building, we haven't decided who would go into that one, but we're certainly designing it, possibly with an elevator as well, so that differently able people will be able to access it and so on. But that will then, we haven't decided, but all three we're going to be renovating. We're also doing the old welfare department building, which is the one opposite the National Housing Corporation building on Country Road. And right now they are in the Weymouth complex. And once we get that renovated, they will be moving over to that building. We're also doing a lot of work at what was the old town planning building, because as you know, they had an environmental issue there. And they moved then to what we call the Warren's office complex. People know it as the Barack building. And we're finished the designs there, and we're going to renovate that building. That would be the Garrison, I think it's Block C, and in my constituency actually. And that will be renovated very shortly. We're also doing the school meals building, also on Country Road, to be renovated as well. That's not been in use for a long time. And another building that we want to do is the Reef Road building, which is the old Commerce building nearby the harbor. And the Barbados Revenue Authority, then who is currently at Mahogany Court, will then be going into that building. So yes, we have lots of plans to get all of these renovations done as quickly as possible. But as you would be aware, there's a process. We have to do the designs. We have to do the scope of works. We have to choose the contractor. It has to go through the tender process or the selection process, or has to use certain rules through cabinet. All of those have to be approved before we can actually start construction. It's a process, but we're following through that process every single day so we can get these buildings completed and handed over to the respective people who would then be occupying them.
You also have the issue of sick buildings.
Yes, that is another issue, and we have started to work on sick buildings. We think a lot of it has to do with how the buildings were first designed. Buildings were first designed in Barbados to be naturally ventilated, which means that there was no proliferation of air conditioning. People would open their windows. The buildings were designed that the air would pass through it, and the buildings would be ventilated that way. What has happened with the proliferation of air conditions, and in particular the split systems or the central systems, it means that buildings do not get that pass through. So you get a lot of dampness. And that dampness tends to then cause growth of mold and fungi and all sorts of things. So it meant that the design of the building that we had before does not fit the current utilization of the building. So therefore we get these itinerant problems. But we're looking at it, seeing what we have to do to improve them and to maybe change the way that we design the buildings for sure, knowing that now we're into the age of air conditioning, and also to retrofit to see how we can reduce mold and reduce the dampness that we currently experience. And you talk about renovation, the best one is the Parliament building. And that's another one that they're working to improve. It suffered significantly from having mold and other issues. It also has a fiberglass problem that we found there as well. And we're in the process of taking all that fiberglass out, treating the mold problem, changing a lot of it back into the natural ventilation in certain areas that it was designed for, and then to be able to change the whole air conditioning system, change out the carpets, which is another problem that we're seeing. We're going to the vinyl tiles, which is like a laminate type of thing, and to get the Parliament building, which was built in the 1840s, I believe it was. And when that building is finished, I'll be very proud to know that I had some small part to play in renovating a building that I've spent 15 years in myself.
The SSA building, are you in a position to speak on that?
Yeah, that's completed.
That's completed?
Yeah, that's completed, and the Ministry of Innovation, Science and Technology has taken possession of that building.
Okay. No, you were leading government's efforts in cleaning the ash. How was that exercise for you?
Yes. So that was something that we woke up one morning and saw that we had to deal with. And it was multifaceted, because it meant that clearly we had to move ash, not only from the roadways, but also from the roofs of buildings, from car parks, and from drains. And that's my biggest concern, and we're still working on that. So we took on, in terms of the Ministry of Transport Works and Maintenance, we were able to take on about 1,500 people to assist us, because remember, there's 1,600 kilometers of roads in Barbados. And it was a lot of work and a mammoth task. We identified the roads that we'd have to do, prioritize them in terms of utilization. So the numbered and lettered roads, highways 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, highway A, B, C, you get the idea. Worked on those, got those done as quickly as possible, and then we worked into intermediate and minor roads, and we're still working on it. But we had problems with procurement. How many places have 600 brooms, 800 brooms, 900 shovels, 400 pan carts, 12,000 bags. And then, of course, you couldn't use the plastic bags. You had to use what we call feed bags. So procurement was difficult. Getting those people onto contract was not easy. Getting them together, getting them paid even, and putting all the infrastructure to get them paid. But we were able to manage it. You can clearly see that the ashes, a significant amount was moved. My biggest concern now is the drains, because when the rains come, we will just see how much flooding and how much work we have to do on the drains. Get those drains clean, get those gutters cleaned, so that we don't have the itinerant problem of flooding thereafter with the ash. But it's not, there are areas that have not gone as well as I would have liked. There are other areas that I'm happy with, but it has progressed, and I'm also happy that a lot of members in various communities came out and did a lot of the ash work themselves. For instance, in a lot of the National Housing Corporation estates, we had planned to go in and start to do a lot of the roadways, a lot of the side walkways and so on that are not roads but are walkways that you find in those estates. But a lot of the residents did a lot of the work themselves. What we're now looking at is what we have to do with the roofs, because some of them may be elderly, could not have done the roofs, and we're now assessing the roofs to see what we have to do to the roofs and how we can help them with their gutters and their drains and things like that. A lot of work, still a lot of work to be done. A mammoth task, but I was happy and proud that the Prime Minister chose me to head it, probably because I straddled both ministries as former Minister of Transport Works Maintenance and then under Housing, so I understood and know the people in both ministries, and I was able to bring that knowledge and that experience together to be able to assist and bring that whole program together. So another program that we're working on is to be able to what's called declaring a district, a registration district. And what that means is, I don't know if you would have seen what Kingsland is, but Kingsland is what we call a registration district. It means that every plot of land is actually registered. So it has a very specific conveyance, which is very specific. And in fact, the conveyance has the coat of arms on it at the front, and it's a very distinct kind of conveyance that you will see, separate from a conveyance that you will see from another piece of land that you may have bought or purchased somewhere else. And the advantage of having a registration district is very precise in terms of its boundaries. And you would no longer say, for instance, you were to lose your conveyance. Normally when somebody loses a conveyance, you often see in the newspaper that this person has applied for a copy of title because they've lost their conveyance and they have to go through this process and so on. With the registration district, you don't have to do that, because you will now have good title because it's in a registration district. So the last registration district was declared when Liz Thompson was the Minister of Housing. And that was about 20 years ago, 18 to 20 years ago. And we are in the process to now do another registration district. And that is something that the ministry has been working on for a long time. And I should be in position very, very shortly to declare another registration district that's not been done for such a long time. So it would mean that people who may not have good title, once they're in that district, will be able to get good title, which means that they'll be able to take that title to the bank and borrow some money on it if they had to send their child to university, if they had to get a medical procedure, things like that, to give good title to people, to empower our people, to give them access to finance, access to funds that they can use to invest in a home, invest in a building, do repairs, educate their children, things like that. It's about empowering people, giving people a chance. You know, I often say, life is not about intelligence, life is about opportunity. And so many people don't get opportunities. And what we need to do as a people and as a government is to give our people opportunities to improve themselves. And that is what I see this registration district as one of the shining lights of the Ministry of Housing, Lands and Maintenance.
No, I'm watching you on this program at home, and I'm saying I've been waiting to have an opportunity to own a home. I'm losing hope, pardon the pun. Your message as housing minister?
My message is we have programs for each and everyone. Yes, we cannot meet the demand, but we're going to meet some of it, and we're going to continue working at it till we get as many people housed as we possibly can in whichever solution meets their pocket.
Minister Duguid, thank you so much.
Thank you.
And that was the Minister of Housing, Lands and Maintenance, Dr. the Honorable William Duguid. Now, another one of the major components in owning a home is the mortgage process. It's also scary for some potential homeowners. And that's why we spoke to former banker, Mr. Trevor Springer, who is joining us now via Zoom. Good evening, Mr. Springer. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Lisa. Thanks for having me.
I want you now to explain for us the entire mortgage process. What do I need to bring in, and how soon do I need to talk to my banker?
A mortgage is a facility where you're going into purchasing your home, and this purchase, which is basically the most important purchase that you would have in your lifetime, and it can be amortized for a period of time, whatever is best suited for you. It can range from 10 years. Most financial institutions will probably go up to 30 years, depending on what you qualify for.
The term you mentioned just now, amortize. What is amortization?
That is the amount of years that you would have your mortgage for, the amount of years that you would be paying back this loan that you have.
So as a former banker, if I go into the bank, what are some of the steps that you would take me through to acquire this mortgage?
Well, the first thing that I am going to do would be to ask you for your basic information. That would be your current financial situation. Before we go any further, we would want to know a snapshot of what we are dealing with you as a customer coming to acquire your mortgage. You would tell us basically what your income would be, what your debts, your assets would be, and we would basically put this, we would calculate for you what your debt ratio is, and if you can qualify for the mortgage. These days, it can be even simpler. If you're going to a bank to get a mortgage, you can actually pre-qualify yourself by going and look for a mortgage calculator and put in the basic information that you would need to say, can I qualify for this mortgage payment?
What's the biggest error you found over the years that people make when they come into the bank to acquire a mortgage?
Basically, people do not know what they want. They have this dream of acquiring a property. They want to own, as people say, the piece of the rock. They have these fantastic ideas of the house that they want to have, but then they don't take into consideration, how are we going to pay for this? And then they come and they may even engage the services of a builder, an architect. And then you have a cost, and then you come into the bank to realize, well, I can't afford $400,000. So then we have to start the process all over again to determine then what you can qualify for.
I'm glad that you mentioned the process, because sometimes it takes upwards of 6 months. Why does it take so long for something like that to be finalized?
The mortgage process can be long, it can be tedious. In some instances, it can be short as well, but it depends on the lender acquiring the documentation to process the mortgage. That in itself can be a short or long process, but once all the information is received, the approval process should be a short one. Now, the length of time for it to happen will depend on the legal process. If you have to go through the legal process where you're buying a property that somebody else owned, then you have to go through the steps to verify the ownership, first, second, third generations of the property. That in itself can take a long time.
Okay.
And if there are any hiccups along the way with that, that can also lengthen the process.
No, if you could just give us a real example. Let's say, for instance, I want to come into the bank to get a mortgage about $400,000. Take me through the requirements in terms of what my salary should be, what length of time we're looking at, etc.
Okay, so you're coming to the bank and you want to acquire a mortgage. The first thing that we're going to ask you is for the documents. So that would be 2 forms of government issued identification, proof of current address, usually a utility bill no older than 3 months, your job letter, 2 pay slips. Some financial institutions may ask you for 3, but 2 might be enough, and proof of your assets. That would be a property, if you own a car, savings, whatever. If you own a property or land, that should also come with the land tax. Now, we would normally ask for proof of liabilities as well. But in these days, now we have a private company in Barbados that does verification of your liabilities. So for a small fee, you can engage that company and they would give you your credit score, and that would be forwarded to the bank. So there's no longer a question of saying, you have to get this, your bank statements, your account statements. And it basically helps the bank because, as I always tell people, there are 2 persons in life you should be straightforward with, your doctor and your banker. Because at the end of the day, those are the people that would guarantee your health and happiness as you go forward in life. So the credit bureau now circumvents that, having to get that information because it's already there for your credit score.
And when you're doing an assessment to see if somebody is fit for a mortgage, what exactly are you looking for? What's the key thing you're looking for?
You're looking at the person's debt to income ratio. Usually, most lending institutions would go up to 43%. That would be the threshold in most cases. A good amount for most people is no. It could start at 35%. 35% is perfect for your debt ratio. And that is key. So that is where then we would have your assets and your liabilities. And that is a key indicator to the lender that you can qualify for this mortgage. What a lender does not want to do is to take it too close to the border, because you do not want to give somebody a mortgage and then they're living, as people say, hand to mouth. We want you to have an ease. We want you to be comfortable in the payments that you are making when you have your mortgage. When you leave the lender, you should be satisfied. You should be happy to know that apart from having your home, that you can live comfortably in it and even have a little savings at the end of the day. So that is one of the things that a lender would look for when authorizing a mortgage.
I'm glad you mentioned the savings aspect, because ordinarily sometimes when people do go to access a mortgage, they really don't have much savings after, because they use that in most instances for the deposit. Your advice to people where that's concerned?
Well, then that is where that you have to check to see what you qualify for. And in most cases, you may have to save towards that down payment. There are some lenders that would give you 100% financing, but if you really want to have the property that you want, you might have to save a little, put aside some funds every month to get to that deposit. And then you also have to look for the legal fees. Legal fees is very important in the mortgage process. So along for saving or having the down payment, you should always also have the amount for the legal fees. So that is where then they have that conversation early with your lender to see what you qualify for. There's nothing wrong with having these thoughts in your head, and you take it to your lender to have that conversation to say, I'm thinking of a mortgage, maybe not right now, maybe next year. I've just started to work, but I'm planning for my future, and I have a mortgage. I want to own my home at some point in time. And that is where then the conversation will start to what you have now and what you need to get to have your mortgage in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. So that is where the savings component of it and what you project you would need to have that down payment and your legal fees at that point in time.
You mentioned that you want to see a job letter, etc. What if I'm a self-employed person and I'm coming into the bank to access a mortgage? How difficult is that?
Good question. For self-employed, you should have 2 to 3 years income tax statements. Audited financial statements is also something that a lender would accept. If those are not to hand, you can also have business account statements for 3 months. That would include information for your expenses, gas, utilities, materials used, etc. There are some people who might be a small entrepreneur, plumber, carpenter, who may not have these things. Some lending institutions would also go for your bank statements, your savings statements, which would show deposits going in and coming out. The challenge with a bank statement is that it doesn't really show the difference between what you're using for personal and business. So you would then have to identify that to the lender. So I would always tell people, if you have a business, have 2 accounts. Even if it's just a savings account, have an account specifically for your business and one for your personal. And a period of 3 years is something that a lender might use to determine your if you can get a mortgage as a self-employed person. Tips that I would give for any person who is desirous of getting a mortgage is, first thing, make sure that you are comfortable with your mortgage payment. Have an in-depth discussion with your sales officer to make sure when everything that you have and you are currently paying for right now, that when you add that mortgage payment to it, that you are comfortable at the end of the day. That is one tip. As far as the documentation for a mortgage is concerned, when you have that mortgage letter or that commitment letter in front of you, make sure you read it thoroughly. Make sure you understand what it is saying before you put your signature to it. Make sure you are clear, crystal clear with whatever is in that mortgage. You should ask about fees. There are things that people forget, that in banking and lending, there are fees. Negotiation fees, commitment fees, early withdrawal fees, closing your mortgage early, there's a penalty for that. Hidden fees. You may even want to discuss the legal costs with your lender. Not that they would be able to give you a thorough assessment of the legal costs. That would be between you and your lawyer. But all of these things that you should discuss when you are going to sit down with a mortgage.
Thank you very much, Mr. Springer. That is Mr. Trevor Springer, a former banker. And I am Lisa Lord, and this was One on One.